Joining me now, just got a huge endorsement from the Virginian pilot over Randy Forbes. Scott Taylor. Scott, good to have you with us.
John, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, Scott, now let's talk about this endorsement you got at the pilot. Does it matter? Will it help? Tell me about it.
Well, I think, anytime you have free publicity like that, it absolutely helps. I mean, I think they laid out a good case for contrast and why they support myself over Randy. You know, they're obviously not the most liberal folks out there, and it's very interesting that the Forbes campaign right afterwards they sent out a thing, bashing the liberal press and how it's no big deal and it's indicative of something bad for us. But of course, he was right in that interview chair trying to get the same endorsement, and they probably would have had an opposite message if they had gotten it. But I think they laid out a good case of why, with the contrast and why they support, and certainly it helps out. It's free publicity.
So go over some of the reasons that they gave you the endorsement, Scott.
Well, they went into, and we've said this all along. I don't no reason to attack personally or anything like that. Although I'm certainly being attacked personally every day. The record's fair game, and there's a lack of record there with Congressman Forbes over 60 years. As you know very well, he's passed one bill to rename a post office in 16 years. And he's worked on military things and stuff like that. Some of it, I believe, actually in the wrong way. But they went over that. They went over not, the sort of extreme views that are sort of out of sync with mainstream America today. Unnecessarily, I think. Sort of crusading on some social issues that are really divisive. And, and that's just something that I'm not into. I think I'm more inclusive than Mr. Forbes. I think that if he was more inclusive and talked to folks that disagree with him, for example, I think that he would be staying in the 4th district and not running it second. So, like I said, I think, and then ideas. I have a lot of new ideas for what's going on in the world today, how our economy works today, how we should be dealing with threats of today and tomorrow in the military, as opposed to trying to fight the last war. So I just think there's aside from us being Republicans and wanting lower taxes and regulations, I think there are some pretty significant contrasts between, sort of the old and the new.
So let's just be candid with each other. Scott, you're going to get outspent.
I like being candid, John.
I know you do. That's why we love having you on. We know you're going to get outspent here in the last 2 weeks, 10-1, right? I mean, they've got a lot more money, cash on hand. The barrage of ads and stuff is going to be coming down the pike. I know money doesn't always win, but that's a disadvantage. We think you're going to carry Virginia Beach. What percentage of Virginia Beach, what percentage of the district does Virginia Beach make up?
Virginia Beach is 62% roughly of the district, and we're going to win Virginia Beach big. And, we're going to do very well everywhere else. You talked about money and money advantage. Sure. Randy Forbes has spent about $1 million already. $1 million. So he's wasted some serious coin. Our polls from February, and then in May as well, were very consistent. And by the way, of course, Randy Forbes has also had, I think, three polls now. The first poll, of course, that came out, and it was very skewed. I know people who took the poll, and they're like, oh, we're up 20 points. And then, they talked about, he was just bashing me. Well, we got all these endorsements, and we have all this money, and Scott can't raise any money and all that stuff. But as you said, money's not everything. And despite what the congressman has said on your show, that he hears nothing negative about him jumping districts and stuff like that. If you haven't heard anything, if he has not heard anything negative about him jumping districts, then he's in a bubble, and he's got too many people around him that are telling him it's great, because we hear it every single day. I know you've heard it. I know you have gotten emails. I know other shows have as well too. And so the money is something, but we have enough money to be able to get our message out. We're going to, our campaign right now is firing on all cylinders. I mean, we're going to be on TV this week. Our social media dominates. It's going 24 hours a day. We've door knocked tens of thousands of homes now. I've spoken personally. There have been about 3,000 people or more who have come out to 25 events that I've had in different geographic locations around the district. We've delivered almost. We're approaching 4,000 yard signs, individual yard signs, not in the streets, but in people's yards. So, think about that for a second. If the turnout's going to be 25 to 30,000 people in a primary, and we got yard signs in almost 4,000 yards from people, how many voters is that? That's a ton of voters. We've identified tons of people. So, He sent out 6 negative, nasty mailers. There's a commercial that's really nasty on me as well too, and that should tell you everything you need to know. So if you're a guy and you're a powerful congressman and you're so powerful, everybody's telling you that, and there are so many people support you and all this stuff. There's no negative stuff, and you got $1 million. Why would you send out 6 negative mailers right now? Why would you send out a commercial that's negative right now? Because if you were winning, what would you do? You'd never say my name.
Right. I mean, I agree with that. Scott, I have to say, I do agree with that. If you're winning, then you don't need any of that stuff, right? Because you don't want to put the other guy's name out there, and you don't want to go negative if you're winning. So I do agree with that. So I think that is why I've said for a long time.
We're very confident, John. I mean, we're very confident. We have a ton of support tomorrow night, and I invite everybody, any listener out there, tomorrow night at the Eagles Nest, 600 Nevin Road, Virginia Beach, 6 to 8 p.m. We're going to have our final campaign rally. There's going to be hundreds of people there.
Where is this?
I don't think Mr. Forbes has had over, despite what they've said, we've seen the pictures. He's never had over 100 people in any event that we've seen. So we just have a tremendous amount of support, and we have a highly organized campaign. We've been running roughshod on the ground game, and we're going to win. We're going to win on June 14th, and I think, like I said, if we were doing poorly, you wouldn't say my name, and you certainly wouldn't send out 6 negative, nasty mailers and do a commercial against me.
Well, the Pilot's editorial said yesterday, I just want to read one excerpt. It said, the former SEAL was elected to the Virginia House of Delegates in 2013 after several attempts to run for office. He's also a candidate of intellectual heft, and his relative moderation would serve the voters of the 2nd District well, better than the alternative. So obviously they think you're intelligent, right? I guess that's a good thing. Better than the opposite, right?
Yeah, it's good they're not calling me an idiot,
This is a text here I just got from Louise in Virginia Beach. She says, Scott got the endorsement of the pilot. Scott, where's the humble appreciation? You want to answer that?
I guess I don't understand the question. Where's the humble appreciation for the endorsement?
Louise, yes.
No, look, I'm of course I'm appreciative. I'm appreciative of anyone's endorsement. Look, I don't expect anything. I appreciate everything. So, like, we're absolutely humbled that the pilot endorsed us. Like I said, I'm humbled by anybody's endorsement, and I'm appreciative for sure.
Let me throw the wild card out here in this election, which is the fact that it's on June 14th. It's an open primary. That's the way Virginia works. I'm in favor of that. As you know, I think that's the right system to have. And what is also interesting about it is there's no Democrat on the other side. So Democrats are allowed to vote in this primary. Now, we saw in 2014 in the 7th District, a lot of moderate Democrats crossed over and voted for Dave Bratt in order to unseat Cantor. Do you see a similar scenario potentially playing out?
I don't know. I mean, we're not targeting Democrats. I'm a Republican. That's our list. Everything that we door knock and talk to people and everything. It's not Democrats. It's Republicans. So those are the people who are going to come out for sure. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if people don't come out. I got to tell you, look, like I said, I think that Mr. Forbes is in a bubble. People really do not like leaving your people behind to save yourself. That's not. I don't, I think your average person, and our polls showed that. Our polls showed that overwhelmingly people were like, absolutely not. You can't stay, if you can't fight for your own people, why would you come over here? Why are we going to elevate you here? So, and sure, there are people who are okay with that. The polls show that it's a small minority, and so I wouldn't be surprised if people were upset about that and may come out and vote because, like you said, it doesn't matter what party you're in; it's just any registered voter. But it's not something that we're targeting.
I think the main thing is to just come out and vote and get involved. Now, I talked to some people yesterday from Virginia Beach. Some were supporting you, some were not. But a couple of the people that were not were very emphatic, had nothing to do with you personally, but they were very emphatic that losing Randy's seniority in the defense realm would really cost jobs to the 2nd District.
Let me address that because I think that's such a I understand that seniority. I won't discount it 100%, but let me first preface this by saying there are people out there, I'm sure, who have worked with leaders that are in positions that haven't done anything, and then there's people out there who have worked with people who are not in position who actually get things done. I'm sure there's plenty of your listeners who have had that. And when you look at the record, and this is what's important, this is what the pilot was talking about yesterday, there's no record of accomplishment there. And when we even look to, and this is with all respect, I mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but this is the reality. When we looked for record to contrast with Mr. Forbes, there just wasn't any. And if you're in Virginia Beach, he actually jeopardized Oceana because he tried to block an OLF field that was not in this district. And that was at a time when they said it was critical to their survival. Now, the Senate actually stopped his amendment, and then fortunately they didn't. It wasn't critical to their survival. But that tells you when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in economic impact and thousands of jobs lost. Now, also, let me also say this. You see the commercials, and he talks about defeating ISIS from his front porch and everything that he's going to do. Look, man, where are we right now? Thousands of shipyard layoffs. Thousands. There are military officers right now who are not getting promoted because there's not money for them to be promoted, so you're hurting their careers and their families' things. GI Bill benefits are on the chopping block. Retirement's on the chopping block. Health care is going up for military and veterans. This is under him. This is under this Congress. So I understand that there are defense people out there, and people are shell-shocked almost. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. When you look at what happened with the recession, part of that was this Congress failed to rein in Fannie and Freddie. Mm-hmm. Which led to the biggest recession since the Great Depression. I certainly got hit on it. You've seen the ads. You've seen the ads.
Right.
But my point is this: Mr. Forbes' whole campaign is an indictment on his lack of accomplishment and this Congress's lack of accomplishment. Mm-hmm. So I understand that people are shell shocked and they're worried about that. But if you are happy where we are, then sure, go vote for him. If you're happy where this country is, if you're happy where we are as a military and national security and the economy wise, if you're happy with that, then please, by all means, go vote somebody who doesn't live here, who can't vote for himself into this district. But if you want something different, if you want some new energy there, if you want someone who looks at things from a different perspective with different life experiences, people who a veteran who understands some of the things that are going wrong with our military, actually wrong with it, who understands that you don't take money to build ships that the military says that they don't need right now from an overseas contingency fund that funds people actually fighting war right now. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about fighting ISIS from your porch, if you want somebody that's like that, then I'm asking you to vote for me on June 14th. But I don't listen. There's nothing in that record to indicate that Mr. Forbes has used his seniority in a way that has benefited this region significantly at all.
All right, now, Scott, one of his questions for you or criticisms, I had him on my show the other day. He said you really don't have a job, that you're a part-time delegate and you have,
wow.
He said you don't have a job. I mean, what's your profession?
I did hear about that. I think the pilot tweeted something. They gave you a little shout out. Listen, I've been self-employed since I left the military in one way or the other. I've dealt with real estate, been successful, had failures in both of those things. Went back and forth to Yemen, negotiating with armed tribesmen in the middle of the desert, protecting American citizens, while this guy was sucking on the government trough for 30 years. So to say that I don't have a job, and he's going to talk about that when all your listeners out there and their families were suffering and people were being furloughed and laid off and losing their homes, this guy's salary is going up. As he's in a safe gerrymandered district, that when the first sign of trouble and toughness, the tough fight comes, he jumps and thinks that he's going to come over here and have a free pass. That if that's what you want, vote him back. But that's the most ridiculous thing in the world to say, oh, you don't have a job. Really? That's crazy.
What about your critics, Scott, who say, look, Scott Taylor's a perennial...
I got critics, man. Who doesn't? That's
right.
Fine.
They say, look, he's a perennial candidate. He ran for mayor. He ran for council. He ran for this. He ran for that. He ran for Congress. Now he's running for Congress again. Then he's running for lieutenant governor. Then he's running for delegate. It's like whatever office is out there, he's a candidate. How do you respond?
Well, let me address it. So, first of all, Randy Forbes has ran for as many offices as I've ran for. That's number one. Number two, Randy Forbes was running for lieutenant governor before he switched over to Congress. He forgets that. He's been in Washington so long, he forgets that. Let me say to you that, I'm a delegate, and we've polled my district 2 times in the past year. Over 90% approval rating with Democrats and Republicans. If he had my approval rating in my district, then he wouldn't be jumping ship. He'd run in his own damn district. But let me also say to you, we were asked to consider running for lieutenant governor by a very powerful chairman. And then we had, 20 or so delegates that were supporting, saying, do it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, no one thought that Congressman Ridgel was going to step down. And quite frankly, part of my own personal consideration for lieutenant governor when I was asked to consider it was, well, what's Scott going to do? Because I'm passionate about national, international issues. I wasn't going to run against him, of course. And I didn't know when that he was going to retire. When he did it, we certainly did some soul searching, had a meeting, and this is what the direction that we decided to take. So, sure, I'm going to have critics. Fine. You know what I mean? But the people are going to decide June 14th who they want to represent them in Congress. And I think that we're going to win.
Scott, I've got a question here from one of your callers in Williamsburg. What is your definitive plan on defeating ISIS?
Well, let me first preface this by saying there is a contrast between Congressman and myself, and elections are about contrast. I'm, number one, in 100% agreement with Senator Tim Kaine and Congressman Scott Ridgel that it's past time, quite frankly, for Congress to take up use of military force or declaration of war on the floor with a vote. I think it is a failure of leadership, quite frankly, when you have people who are overseas fighting right now. 3 of them now have died in Iraq and Syria, and you have Congress who is hiding in the weeds and scared to take a tough political vote, while scared to put their political lives on the line, while people are putting their physical lives on the line. And why that's important is you have to have leadership behind our people. You have to unify the country or not. Take it up, take a vote on it, authorize the force or not. My opponent would say that Obama, he doesn't have a strategy, and that's why we shouldn't bring it up on the floor, because there's no strategy. How long are you going to keep saying that? Listen, I agree that he has a strategy. Well, force him to come with a strategy to make sure that we unify our leadership behind our troops or not. You know what I mean? So I'm 100% for that. You and I have talked about this numerous times, John, on the show. You've got to deny a safe haven for ISIS. There's no doubt about that. That's not just America. That is partnership with Arab allies on the ground as well, over there, and not just Arab allies, but European, and quite frankly, all over the world. Well, the other thing is that you have to deal with, so you're dealing with the physical space and making sure that you deny a safe haven for terrorism to grow, but you also have to counter a narrative. You have to counter a narrative because of the technology today, of course. It allows for Islamic extremists to be able to exponentially grow and either find those needles in the haystack of people who either, one, already agree with their ideology, or 2, are easily converted, which, of course, prompts these lone wolf attacks that you have here. So you can't be the State Department tweeting out a couple tweets trying to counter a narrative. You have to have a concerted and a very direct effort and determined effort, quite frankly, to counter an ideological narrative, like you had in the Cold War against communism. And if you don't, it's just going to continue to metastasize as cancer and grow and cause problems all over the world. So that's what I would do.
Okay.
But first and foremost, you got to stand up and authorize use of force. That's the first thing. You got to get on the books and argue this in the halls of Congress with the people's representatives to say, are we going to unify against this fight or not? Can't continue to blame a president when you have people who are physically fighting right now. It's an abysmal failure of leadership, in my opinion.
Well, look, we've been saying this for some time, and Tim Kaine and I are in total alignment with this. I've been fighting this battle for the junior senator from Virginia, the Democrat, for some time. There's no AUMF, and it's not the responsibility of the president to go get one. It's the responsibility of Congress to demand one or to cut the funding off.
They're talking about, he didn't have a strategy. Well, then make him have a strategy.
Right. Demand him to come or simply cut the funding off. That's the way the Constitution is set up, and we're not doing anything about it. And look, we just sent another 250 troops into Syria. We've had some casualties. No one has any idea what the hell the mission is or why or when.
Yeah, exactly. So you have mission creep, right? So you just have mission creep. And listen, and this is what drives me insane. And as a guy who went to war, look, I'm the only one in this race who's a veteran, and the only one who, I think there was a thing, who said, Iraq, desert dust on my boots, stuff like that. So listen, you either send people over to fight and win, or you don't. That's it. There's no middle ground. You don't keep having mission creep like you had pretty much in Vietnam as well, too. And all that does is, in the long term, cost a hell of a lot more money, and it gets more people killed.
Okay, I've got another question from a caller. How would your voting record be different than Randy Forbes? Can you be specific
Well, I gotta
votes
have
that
a
you would make
specific
that would be
thing. I mean,
different?
I voted on, I don't know, 1,000 bills this year. So, specifically, I'm not sure exactly what specific thing he's asking. But I'll tell you one thing that we definitely differ, and that was in the paper today, as a matter of fact. Look, I'm 100%. I put my life on the line for religious freedom. I believe in religious freedom. I think it's sacred, fundamental right. But at the same time, the pendulum can swing too far. And I listen. I stood up against my party in saying they wanted to pass a bill, which Mr. Forbes supports. Mr. Forbes penned an op-ed that basically said that the same discretion that the leaders of Chipotle and what meat they want to pick and sell, that the business owner can have the same discretion on who they serve or not. And specifically, what they're talking about are, gay people or people who have sex before marriage. That's crazy and stupid, quite frankly, to me. And you're seeing things in Mississippi. Religious freedom is extremely important, and I will fight and die for it, and I've put my life on the line for it. But that's not religious freedom. That's discrimination. So I think that there's one thing that's a huge contrast, because I don't think that that's of, the reality today. I mean, it's crazy to me that you would say, I'm going to allow for a business owner who religiously believes that you shouldn't have sex before marriage not to serve someone coffee. That's crazy. Mm-hmm. Under that same logic, under the same exact logic, you're also saying that if John Fredericks is a Wahhabi Islamist and he has a car dealership, then he's not going to sell a car to a woman because he doesn't believe they should drive. That's just it's crazy. It's not of the century, in my opinion. It's not religious freedom. It's too far. So we would vote differently there for sure. We would also vote differently, specifically with like something that we were just talking about. He just put forth something. I think Mr. Forbes has been more active in the last, 3 or 4 months than he has in about 10 years. But he puts forth something to buy new ships, and I think it was a couple $1 trillion, something like that, to build new ships. I don't disagree that we need more ships, but the law of the land right now, and what is absolutely devastating the military and readiness and making people have to go to museums, get parts, and hurting career paths, is sequestration. So unless you repeal and replace that, it doesn't matter. So he put forth, that this money to build new ships. Well, we don't have the money to staff them. We don't have the money to maintain them. We're not even maintaining what we have now. And where he got the money from was from the Overseas Contingency Fund. And what that means is he wanted to take money that funds people who are fighting. So think about that for a second. This is a guy who talks about supporting the military, and I'm not saying that he does not. I'm not saying there's any ill intent here. I'm just saying it's wrong. Imagine if you're over in Iraq or Afghanistan and there's some congressman that's trying to take the funding away that funds you fighting on the front lines to build ships that we don't need right at this moment. We will need them. There's no doubt about that. But there's things that we can't pay for now and maintain now. So I would absolutely not support that, because I believe it's irresponsible and certainly the wrong thing to do in hopes that the next president may or may not give you a supplemental. Meanwhile, you're taking funds away from people who are putting their butts on the line and fighting. That's crazy to me, and I would 100% disagree with that.
Let's get to the TSA disaster. If you've taken a plane recently, like we have, you'll notice that the lines are just out of control. It's a logjam. It's got people in a straitjacket, people missing planes. Look, this is another government-run agency. Congress seems incapable of doing anything. If you were there, what would you do about this issue?
Listen, like many of you traveling out there, I've traveled a lot, and it frustrates me beyond belief, because almost every airport I go in, I've probably been, 40 some countries. I'll travel a lot. So when I go to the airport, I look around and I count the TSA agents, and I look at the ones that are sitting around and doing nothing, and meanwhile we're standing in line waiting to be screened, and it drives me insane, just like I'm sure it does all of your friends there. It's a bloated program that's ineffective. Mm-hmm. I think there are better ways to screen people, that's not just making more jobs and our tax dollars making people stand around and do nothing. So I think that whole program has got to be reformed, streamlined, and made a lot smaller.
When you say small, like what specific action would you do? Because, politicians talk, and meantime, we're still waiting in line.
No, you're absolutely right. I think it needs to be cut. The program needs to be cut, and mandated cuts. It needs a haircut, but you also need to have a strategy enforced. The same thing with the president, right? You have the power of the purse in Congress So you say we're going to cut this program and streamline it. It forces them to come up with better, to come up with efficiencies and make things happen in a different way. So that's the power. That's the oversight you have in Congress. And quite frankly, Congress has done a poor job of abdicating its responsibility and its oversight to the executive branch, which is very powerful right now, which is very out of balance in our checks of balance system. We have to bring things back and power back into the congressional power, basically. So yes, here's the purse strings. You put legislation in to reduce the budget. You make them come up with efficiencies that, number one, save our money, and number two, get us through the lines faster.
Scott, let's get to some of Trump's policies. I believe Donald Trump is going to get elected president. If he does, and I believe he will, one of the things that is a centerpiece, that will be a centerpiece of his administration, is going to be a series of tariffs against companies that move their warehouses or distribution centers out of the United States, make the goods there in order to take advantage of cheap labor, costing American workers jobs, and then they simply ship the goods back into the U.S., and I don't believe there's any price saving to consumers. I think it's all hogwash, but that's just me. I'm not going to ask you that question. So my question is, would you be willing to support a series of international tariffs of goods coming into the United States until we have a better trade balance or not? Straight up question.
Yeah, and I'll give you a straight up answer. Let me preface it by saying that, look, I don't know exactly what his proposals are, so I have to speak generally because I don't know, specifically what his proposals are. But I will tell you, in general, I actually prefer incentivizing rather than penalizing. So, Mr. Trump and I may differ on that, but I definitely agree with the sentiment. I agree about the bad trade deals and our jobs and our money being shipped overseas. And listen, we have over $2 trillion and a 35% corporate tax rate, the highest in the world. It's anti-American. I would prefer to deal with that, to cut a deal. Mr. Trump's obviously good at deals. To cut a deal to get some of those, trillions of dollars back into this economy with the money market multiplier to get it flowing through here. But I prefer to incentivize export policies as well too, so that we can be creating goods here and shipping them across, outside of this country, and then therefore bringing money back. I think it's every dollar or so, it's $4 when you export and bring dollars back here. So, I don't know exactly what he's proposing, but in general, I prefer incentivizing as opposed to penalizing.
Okay, let's get to let's stick on.
So look, it's as important too. I think. Let me just say this one thing. So, and Congress is the oversight, right? So whether it's a Republican president or a Democrat president, it's up to us, the people's representatives, to provide oversight for whatever the policies are. So, and it's important. It's important if it's the right thing, and even if it's a Republican president, then you should stand up and say that. So, and I'm not afraid to, whether it's Republican or Democrat president.
You might have to deal with the Puerto Rican bailout or debt restructure if you get elected. That might not. There's no guarantee that's going to get resolved before the presidential election is over. If you were still dealing with that, would you be in favor of Paul Ryan's Puerto Rican or Puerto Rico debt restructure, which is essentially a Wall Street? I mean, I'm just caught like it is. They call it a debt restructure. It's basically a Wall Street bond bailout. These are Wall Street executives who bought bonds in Puerto Rico, figuring that even if they go belly up, they get restructured or bailed out, which is exactly what Paul Ryan is trying to do. Taxpayers, at the end of the day, on the hook. You take a risk, and I guess in our Wall Street society, they get protected. If I buy a bad stock, I'm out. If they buy a bad stock or they make a bad bond decision, they get bailed out by the government. If you were in Congress right now, how would you stand on that?
All right, so a couple of things. Let me also preface it by saying I haven't read specifically what that deal is. I've been very busy, obviously, campaigning.
Sure,
but
that's
in
fine.
general, I'm not for it. I'm not
fair.
for the bailout. Listen, Puerto Rico has done many things wrong, and also some of the people that that you're talking about. I am very aware that there are Puerto Rican bonds that are inside of pension fund portfolios and stuff like that. That, quite frankly, some retirees were not even aware of that they owned these bonds that were at very, very high risk. So I'm not for over-regulation, right? I'm not for over-regulation, but it is the responsibility of Congress to be able to properly regulate. Just like when you look at the reeling in Fannie and Freddie, which caused a recession. I've read about Puerto Rican bonds for years now, how risky they were and how it was coming to a crash. So I know that on Capitol Hill they've known it too. They have to have. So, I mean, maybe not your average congressman, but certainly the people on the key committees that would hear about that. So I'm not for bailing them out. They've known this. They have to have oversight. When you look at the island itself, and I've spent over a year of my life in Puerto Rico, so the electricity costs in Puerto Rico are absolutely crazy. I mean, it's extremely expensive. The government's run very, very inefficiently. You have to be able to put things on there. Not regulations, but oversight on the government itself too, to make sure that they're running in an efficient way. And they should, and quite frankly, that should have come out of Washington years ago when they knew that these bonds were extremely risky, when they knew that they were all through pension fund portfolios, and that the government itself was running it into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So, look, I am not for bailing them out. I'm for tougher measures for that government. When you look at Puerto Rico and how that government's run, how bloated it is, that's where the change needs to take place. You have to take place on how it's run. You have to change how it's. We can be exporting natural gas, not exporting because it's part of America, but sending natural gas down there to power them, as opposed to very expensive electricity costs or renewables that are down there. I mean, those are the type of changes that you have to do on that island. I'm not for bailing them out with taxpayer dollars.
Okay, let's get to Glass-Steagall. Bernie Sanders in his presidential campaign has railed on this for some time, and I'd like to tell before I ask a question, what my position is, so we're on the same page. I happen to agree 100% with Sanders on this. Look, he is for a reenactment of the Glass-Steagall Act. He says that 5 banks in the United States, think about this, control 95% of all the credit. 5 banks. So we're beyond too big to fail. When we had the crash in 2008, there were 8 banks. They got bailed out. Many of them took the TARP money and then gobbled up the little banks, so it's worse than ever. Would you be in favor of breaking up these banks?
Depends on what that looks like, John. That is not a straight up question. That's not a bust on you, but it's not. I think it's a lot more complicated than that. But I agree, and I think that everybody out there is not comfortable with where we are. They're obviously not comfortable where we were after Fannie and Freddie failed, and the banks themselves, and of course Congress. There are many congressmen who will tell you that they had a gun to their head. The economy is going to fail if you don't bail these people out. And I would have not supported that. Would have not supported the bailout. I think that they could have gone through a structured bankruptcy in some of them. And I don't like where we are right now with the banking system, because what happens the next time that there's some kind of problem and they come to Washington, and same thing. If you don't bail this one of the 5 banks out, then the fifth of the economy is going to collapse and the world economy is going to collapse. Well, I think that something has to be done. What that looks like, I'm not prepared to say today.
Sounds like, though, you would be some type of change from the system we have. I have 1 minute. Final question. NATO. Mr. Trump says this thing needs to get relooked at. It's outdated. It's antiquated. We're paying 89% of NATO's expenses. We got countries, he says, that are ripping us off. And he says it's no longer viable in the way it is. Would you be in favor of relooking at how NATO is structured or not?
Absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely. Like I'm certainly one that you need to back up your allies and your friends and be there for them. But if something's not working, then you change it. So no, I actually agree with him. It is an outdated structure. It needs to have more teeth. It has to be a closer alliance. You're right. We talked on this program before. You had Turkey trying to get Cyprus into NATO so they could justify their occupation of half the island. I mean, I agree. I agree that it needs to be restructured and that people need to pay a little bit more for their defense. I agree with that.
All right, that's going to be our final question. We're out of time. Scott, you said you got a rally.
We got a rally at the Eagle's Nest restaurant in Virginia Beach, family friendly. There's going to be hundreds of people there. Senator Bill DeSteff, Sheriff Stolley, Delegate Stolley. There'll be others there. We have a band, Cheap Thrills, playing. We have food there. Come out, join our rally, see our momentum firsthand into June 14th. We're asking for your support, of course, and your vote. My website, scotttaylor.us. John, thanks a lot for having us on this morning.
What time is the rally?
6 to 8 p.m. 6 to 8 p.m. Eagle's Nest, Hilltop area, 600 Nevin Road.
Thanks for being with us, Scott.